So it's being recorded. This will be up on the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross YouTube channel, hopefully sometime next week. And I'm very grateful this morning to have Jerrigrace Lyons and Shannon from Final Passages with us. And they will be joining us down here in this little box in a minute. Before we begin, I just want to say a couple of things about sort of the housekeeping here. We're going to disable the opportunity for you to inadvertently unmute yourselves, which means that on the back end, when it's Q&A, if you try to say something and you can't, somebody just put up in the chat, Susan, please let us unmute, and I will remember to do that. We also, if you get bounced out of the room for any reason at all, just come back in. We've disabled the waiting room so you can just rejoin us. And before we get started, I wanted to just say a couple of things for those of you that might be joining us. If you'd like to put up in chat where it is that you're zooming in from, that's always really wonderful to see people from all over the US, usually Canada, and we usually have some folks from the UK or other places that also join us. And for those that are unfamiliar with the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, we are a 501c nonprofit organization that was inspired by the life of psychiatrist, humanitarian, and hospice pioneer, Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. The foundation was founded 1 year after Elisabeth's death in 2005 by her son, Ken Ross. Over the course of the last 17 years, the foundation's chapters have been created on 4 continents. Ken is actually in Africa right now. He was attending the African Continent's Palliative Care and Hospice Conference, and he should be back next week where he'll be able to put up the recording. So it will be up on the YouTube channel, and you all will get an email message about that. So Elisabeth is known for her book primarily on death and dying. She published 23 other books in 44 languages. And though she is also known as the death and dying lady, what Elisabeth loved most was life and living it to her fullest. And that is her wish for everybody, that we live our life as fully as possible up until our last breath. So that is our introduction to the foundation. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing, and I'm going to do this briefly so that Sally and Jerrigrace can go a little bit longer and introduce themselves. But I'm going to introduce Sally, who has been working with Jerrigrace for quite some time now. Sally wrote her master's thesis on death, on dying, loss, and grief. She continued studying with Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, Raymond Moody, Sylvia Boorstein, Rabbi Alan Liu, and Jerrigrace. She participates in Tahara, the Jewish ritual washing and blessing before burial. She coaches individuals and families preparing their end-of-life plans, recently developing the COVID-19 Advanced Directive. And Jerrigrace's brief bio here. She's the founder of Final Passages, is a minister, a death midwife, educator, home funeral guide, and a Reiki master. She founded the educational nonprofit organization Final Passages in 1995 to inform people about little-known funeral options, natural death care rights and practicalities, green burial, and the benefits of bringing funerals back into the home and family care. Jerrigrace is featured on the acclaimed PBS documentary, A Family Undertaking, which is also available on Netflix as a DVD, and we hope to send more information about that out to you all when we send the follow-up with a link to the recording. Somebody's asking for closed captioning. Yes, we can turn this on. And I'm going to turn this over now to Jerrigrace and bring you down here. I'm going to add you to the spotlight with Sally, and I am going to remove myself. So thank you both, and I look forward to hearing your talk.
Sally,
Sure. There you go.
All right. Sally, do you want to say more about your beginnings? And
Oh, sure. I was going to defer to you, but I'm happy to. Thank you, Susan. For the rest of you, I want you to know how much I adore Susan. She is a real powerhouse. She is such a gift to many communities, and I have participated in some of the work that she has sponsored, and I learn every time. So thank you, Susan, for all your hard work. Yeah, your steadfastness, girl. A little bit to add is to Susan's comment about Elisabeth, about We do the end of life work not only to be in service to those who are facing into a more imminent end of life, but also people who are wanting to live their lives more fully. And that's my motto is live like you're dying and die like you're living.
Mhm.
So squeeze every moment out of that. Thank you, Yvonne. I saw your nod there. And my work is currently moving in a somewhat new but old direction in that I had my first advanced directive in 1976 when my mother sent me a little card that fit into my wallet that said, I don't want to be on machines. So I'm doing a lot more upstream advanced care planning. And I'm trained as a life coach. So I use those coaching skills to help people find their truth and not anyone else's. And I'm also have been involved in animal medicine for a long time. And I'm working with families who are facing euthanasia decisions, as well as doing grief ritual for the wildlife. And it could be a quail that I found that had flown into a window, to doing prayer for the animals that are dying in the wildfires. Jerrigrace, what would you like to say?
Thank you, Sally. Well, I will ditto what you said about Susan too. We really are grateful to be presenting again and appreciate all the work that she has done to bring on some incredible people presenting and informing our communities. And certainly that's one of our missions of Final Passages, is to inform communities as much as we can about how to prepare for end of life, how to look at what conscious dying means. And as Sally said, it's conscious dying is about conscious living. So developing a practice during our lifetime is part of the way that we can be ready when our time comes to cross that threshold. And training people also is part of our mission, training people to be able to assist others who are facing that time, which can be very, very fraught with fear and just the unknown. The unknown is very scary to people, and helping them talk about those fears and concerns. And so that's one of the things Sally and I've been teaching in our workshops, which we developed a long time ago. We have a 3-level course of honoring life's final passage, where we help prepare people for end of life and have people who want to do end of life doula work be with them and guide them through that and after they die, which we're going to show today. And we're mostly going to focus on post-death care. And that beginnings for me was when my friend Carolyn died 29 years ago, and or 28 years ago, excuse me, and she was a nurse and just went to work to care for an older woman in her home. And after breakfast, she said she wasn't feeling well. They called 911, but they weren't able to resuscitate her. And they pronounced her on the way to the hospital, and then they found a card in her wallet that said contact so-and-so in the event of her death. They called her close friend Norma. She formed a phone tree. We all found out that day, and we all came together. And then we found out from her friend Norma that Carolyn had written out instructions on how she wanted to be cared for when she died. And that was to bring her body home from the hospital and do the preparation of her body, washing, dressing, blessing her with oils, and so forth. And we all came together to carry out her wishes the best we could. That was my initiation into what I now call home funerals. And my friend Janelle and I termed home funerals when we wrote our guidebook. And that has stuck. And so now many people, I've helped hundreds, literally 450 or more families with their family-directed home funeral. So out of that experience, I'm able to show you today. One, a CBS little news report that was done on Channel 5 first, and then we're going to go through a PowerPoint, and Sally and I will talk about some of the experiences of home funerals, what it's all about, and also we're going to cover green burial and other options for our final release of our body, which some people call disposition. That is the cremation, burial. There's also water cremation now, and there's also natural organic reduction. So these may be new concepts to some of you, and we're happy to introduce them because they're coming to us in your community soon, if they're not already there. So with that said, I am going to put on the little CBS, and it's just a few minutes long. And that was just a little 11 o'clock news report done back in 2006.
Before you start that, Jerrigrace, it just occurred to me, how do you feel we have people write their questions in the chat so that you'll have a way of capturing it, and we'll hold questions until the end of the presentation?
Right. Thank you for announcing that. That is what we talked about with Susan this morning, and we need to let everybody know to, yes, please do hold your questions, and then we will, or put them in the chat, and then you can use the reactions at the end to raise your hand as well. So we'll do the CBS thing, and then we'll go right into the slideshow. So this is just a quick, gives you an overview of what a home funeral looks like. Oops, Mark, that isn't what I wanted. Do I just hit this? I don't know. I clicked on it. And
Wait a minute. Where's this?
I clicked on it and it brought up this. This is what we want.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what we want. I just didn't know that was going to come out.
Where's the share?
I hit share already.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And I optimized.
Yeah, we're viewing your screen, and we also.
When her father died at home, a back room became the funeral.
Can you see it? Yes. Okay. Let it go.
Oh, and you have your gray squares, Jerrigrace.
Okay. Got it. And they're going away. Okay.
Funeral parlor.
No question in our minds that we were going to keep him here, take care of him, have the memorial here.
And this Bay Area woman helped set it up.
I call myself a death midwife.
A simple and less expensive way to honor loved ones.
My father looked regal in his death.
Do-it-yourself funerals. Tonight at 11 on CBS 5.
When a loved one dies, we may suddenly find ourselves turning to mortuaries and undertakers for help. But some people say there is a simpler, cheaper way to take care of our dearly departed, if you're willing to do it yourself. Reporter Mike Sugarman says it's called a home funeral. And I must warn you, the story includes pictures of corpses.
So this is the room that Fred lived in for the last 3 months of his life.
Suzette Burrows says her father, Fred, had a good long life.
This is his second wife, Nikki, here.
She cared for him in the back room of her Sebastopol house. They talked about what to do when the end came.
No question in our minds that we were going to keep him here, take care of him, have the memorial here, and have everybody who wanted to come by and see him.
So when Fred died, that same back room became his funeral parlor. And over the next 3 days, Suzette was able to be both his grieving daughter and his funeral director. She had help.
I call myself a death midwife.
Jerry Lyons shows people how to do it themselves. Everything from arranging the death certificate to preserving the body with dry ice.
They don't have to embalm. They don't have to buy an expensive casket. There's no reason why, if we care for somebody in our lifetime, that we suddenly have to give their body away to strangers. This is a picture of my friend Carolyn, who died.
Lyons used to be afraid of death. But 12 years ago, her friend died suddenly and left instructions. She wanted close friends to dispose of her body.
I don't know which was more shocking, her death or finding out that suddenly we were going to be bringing her body home and caring for her there. None of us knew it was legal. We didn't have any idea you could do this.
Instead of being creeped out by the body, Jerry says she felt a surprising sense of peace. Since then, she's helped with nearly 300 home funerals.
And she came here immediately, told us what we could and couldn't do, and we washed his entire body together, and I shaved him. He never smelled. We put coins on his eyes, and we put a bandana around his head so his mouth would stay closed, and we put his hands in position, and then the next morning, that's the way he was. And we were able to take these things off because he had kind of gone into rigor mortis in that shape. People that were absolutely horrified at the thought of going into the room went in and came out feeling so relieved. I mean, my father looked regal in his death.
Even the grandchildren were allowed to participate.
They knew he was dead, and they just walked in, and they weren't taught fear. And I think we're so fearful of death because we want to avoid it as much as possible.
And if you think being a death midwife is a sad business,
People ask me all the time, isn't that a depressing job that you do? Actually, I find it so rewarding.
Jerry Lyons says she no longer fears death and is gratified to share her sense of peace with grieving families. He also saved thousands of dollars.
More pictures of him.
But for Suzette, it wasn't about the money.
Having the memorial here, dressing his body, all of that really helped me with the transition of losing my father. And it was a very fulfilling, gratifying experience.
Mike Sugarman, CBS 5 Eyewitness News.
And Jerry Lyons is training more people to become death midwives. For more information about home funerals, you can go to cbs5.com.
I'm just going to note that we heard from some folks that their videos froze. And what we'll ask you is when we go to the next video, please switch off the video for your Zoom feed. That will help with the bandwidth.
And it is a slideshow, so
Oh, right. It'll be better.
not. I don't think it's going to be a problem for a slide as it might be for a video. Okay, let's hit share screen again. And let's put this up. And so make this big. Yeah, I hit share. But I want to get rid of play. And I want to hit.
Someone asked about having a copy of the presentation, and this is a slideshow that had many, many hearts and hands and minds involved in producing it. And we do sell it. And if you're interested in buying that, you can contact Jerrigrace directly. But as I said to the person who asked about the PowerPoint, to the extent that you can let yourself be in the presentation and notice what kind of things come up for you from your left brain, from your right brain, from your heart, from your gut, I think you'll absorb more than you realize.
Thank you, Sally. That was good to point out. So I'm just.
And I will let people know that while you're getting this going, Jerrigrace, that in the email that gets sent out with the recording link, any information that you'd like to share, you can send me an email and I'll just cut and paste it and put it in there, how people can contact you, your website, any classes that are coming up that you'd like people to know about.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we decided to give the title of this presentation, Bringing Funerals Back Home, because in fact, home funerals really are the tradition in this country. And so I wanted to point that out right away in this presentation that many people feel or have forgotten because it's been a number of generations since everybody took care of their own loved ones when they died. But all we're doing is going back to ancient and old traditions. And so this is truly up until the early 1900s, all the families cared for their own loved ones. There wasn't any funeral homes or mortuaries. There wasn't anything set up like that. So maybe they used the person who had the bigger home with a big living room, which they then called the parlor. and to gather, but this was common. It was commonly done. Everybody knew that you just wash the body of your loved one the way you would give somebody a bed bath when they're ill. And then they would have their gatherings in the home, gathered around the person who died. And then they would bury somebody in the churchyard or in their family cemetery, if they had a lot of land. And of course, as cities developed, it became more difficult to do that, which is part of the reason that some of the funeral homes started opening in the cities. Then people have asked me over the years, what's the difference between a home funeral and what we're doing now, the conventional methods? So one day I sat down and I decided to make a list of the differences between home funerals and conventional funerals. And one, of course, is the family is involved and they are taking care of their own loved one and all the arrangements that need to be done, whereas the other is conducted by a funeral director or mortician, or going back even further, the undertaker. So go ahead.
In other words, a stranger. So the big contrast between beloved family and a business.
Absolutely. Yep. One takes place in the home and the other takes place in the mortuary. One allows extended time with the deceased, and this is a very big difference, because if somebody is lying in honor at home, we have time to go and sit with them anytime during the day or night as it suits us, as it feels right to do. And we can just sit silently, read to them, play music for them, meditate with them, whatever you want to do. Whereas, of course, if they're in a funeral home, usually the only time we have time to spend with them is if we pay to have a service where we can, it's called viewing or visitation of the body, and you're paying by the hour to do that. And usually you only have a couple of hours for the whole service, with people just coming by for a few minutes to look at the person or sit with them. It's not like you can just sit all night with them and do what you want. So that's a big difference. Our conducted home funerals are conducted with no invasive procedures such as embalming, and not that all conventional funerals include embalming, but you do have to sign a form saying you don't want the body embalmed, or you understand they're not embalmed, or whatever it is, or that you're agreeing to embalm them. So most people I've come across over the years think that embalming is just part of a funeral and you have to do it. But there is no need to do that anywhere in the United States. The only time I know that they may try to insist on you embalming is if you're going to ship a body to another country. Even then, there's ways to get around that as well. And of course, home funerals involve the family in the burial or witnessing of the cremation. If they want to, they can fill in the grave, or they can witness the casket going into the chamber if they, and not all funeral homes offer that option, but you can certainly ask. And usually with conventional funerals, they're taking care of all those details. We encourage green and sustainable options, and conventional funerals don't necessarily know what those green options are, or if they do, they won't necessarily mention it unless the family asks about it, such as a biodegradable casket, where to get one, and various things like that. So with home funerals, of course, the costs are usually offer a significant savings, and conventional funerals can be and are often excessive. People often in their emotional state will spend a lot more than they intended to when they're presented with various options in the funeral home. And sometimes they're made to feel like if they don't buy a really expensive casket, they're not giving their loved one the best possible funeral they could. So there is some sales pressure, at least this is what I've been told many times over by people. So facts about home funerals. They're legal in all states. Funeral directors must be involved in 9 or 10 of those states. It has gone back and forth through the years. And though when I started, it was only around 5. So we're sad to say that we should be going the other direction. That should be challenged in all states. People should be able to carry out all arrangements, including filing their own death certificate and transferring their body to the crematorium or cemetery without involving a funeral director. And mostly those funeral directors are just involved to sign off on a death certificate. But families can do that. Go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, and sorry, I stepped on your toes there.
No, it's okay.
The National Home Funeral Alliance and those of us who are practicing either as advocates or in a private practice successfully fought the state of Virginia that tried to change their regulations about the preservation of the body after death. And we beat it. And the legislator who introduced that bill was a licensed funeral director.
Yes. Yeah, that their lobbyists are the ones that are presenting bills that want to stop families from having the right, exercise their rights to carry out the home funeral. And so the deceased can remain in the home for a wake or vigil for extended periods in all states. In the state of California, we have no time limit designated in any laws or codes or statutes. So it's up to the family, and most of the families that I've helped over the last 26 years have chosen about a 3-day wake, which is common around the world. Most people feel, and most cultures and religions feel, that it takes about 3 days for the spirit to fully complete its process and fully leave the body. So that's the reason people often choose 3 days. And people feel it in their body. They can visually see that there's a change, and they feel it in their body, and they really say, I think the person is really gone now, and we're ready to let them go. So that's a lot different than having somebody show up your door and taking them away after just an hour or two after their heart stopped beating. And that feels a lot like their heart is being ripped out, really. And so many people have said to me, oh, I wished I had known I could have kept them home longer. They just didn't feel ready. So caskets in the home may be personalized to reflect beliefs and values, as you see this young man decorating a casket for his grandfather. I have just recently looked up the average cost of cremations, and whereas they used to be much lower than this and are much lower if you just get what's called a direct cremation, that means they just come and pick up the body, take it to the funeral home, store it in the refrigeration until the paperwork is complete, and then cremate it. That's called a direct cremation. There's nothing done to the body. There's no visitation of the body. There's no actual funeral or service. It's just very simple and direct. And then you can, in our town at least, you can pay as little as $1,400 for a direct cremation. Some parts of the country you may pay less. Some parts of the country a direct cremation may cost as much as $4,500. So it varies for the same service, same simple service, it varies tremendously. So it pays to shop around. But a conventional with a cremation with a regular funeral now is up to $6,000 or $7,000, and a burial is $8,000 to $10,000, and this is average. This isn't what a lot of people spend way more. So what is a home funeral? It's where the family's planning out and carrying everything out themselves, the after-death rituals and ceremonies like decorating a box, preparing the body for lying in honor, creating ways to express their grief, such as decorating this box, filing their own paperwork, transporting the deceased, and facilitating the final disposition, such as, again, filling in the grave, watching the body go into a chamber at the crematorium. And as guides, it's our job to educate the family about their legal and innate rights to hold a home funeral. It's also our job to facilitate maximum involvement of families and their social network. In other words, allow them to make the decisions and help them create what they want versus a director who just offers you certain packages of the way things are done, and you can maybe pick A, B, or C, but it doesn't offer all the creativity that people can do on their own. And we do help them enough to where they don't feel burdened by these choices. We offer all kinds of suggestions if they're asked. We also teach families how to prepare and carry out home funerals according to the state laws. So, we make sure that we're giving them the proper advice and information. And we offer education to the community through all kinds of things, festivals, and we've had booths at green festivals, at farmers markets, at many different places around town, and we also do in-services at hospices, hospitals. I'm going to be giving one to our Rotary Club, local Rotary Club, this next month. So any organizations in our area, we try to get that information out to people. That's the job of our nonprofit. And when we say partner, we mean we're associated with them in that we have done education with them, and we try to inform them about the laws, because we've found over the years not to assume that they know what the state laws are regarding home funerals. So we've had to explain to many of these agencies who we are as a nonprofit, and that people have a right to care for their own. And in case they get any calls from a neighbor about somebody having a home funerals, they'll know. We also inform all these other agencies and businesses. Also crematoriums and cemeteries. I've talked to all of them in our area, and a couple of them are very open-armed as far as accepting what families want to do on their own. They'll receive the body from the family if they want to drive them to their mortuary, and others are not that way. So we found the ones that are, and we work with them mostly, and it's of course up to the family, but if they're asking for a referral, we're going to send them to the places that are very accepting and try to meet all the families wherever their needs occur. So we go to churches and places of worship, and we also give them out as resources if they need a place for a funeral to take place. We know some good places to send them, and also where to purchase dry ice, and we inform them about how much to buy and how to use it. Also other forms of ice, Techni ice and cooler shock, which are used in different ways. Businesses that sell biodegradable caskets or shrouds, we can send them to those places as well. There's a lot of funeral homes don't know about those places. This is one form of ice that we use. We maybe use dry ice intermittently with cooler shock ice. And it's something you can buy online and keep in your freezer and use for shopping and other things. You can reuse them. We wrap them so they're not ever touching the body. But they do stay cold much, much longer than regular kinds of ice. Same with Techni Ice, and it's thinner. You have to soak it in water, but then we use it for pets or small children or infants where they're covered with a blanket and nobody sees it, but it's not going to freeze the body like dry ice freezes where it's near. So we use those in certain circumstances. We help people if they want to file their own death certificate and disposition permits. We can help them with that. Otherwise, if they want to hire a funeral home to take it from that point after they're complete with their home funeral, then the funeral home will do the paperwork. But if they want to be involved all the way to the end, then we'll help them complete their paperwork and file it. And then we help people with preparing for a lying in honor. As we mentioned, we help with washing the body, dressing them. Sometimes friends, family show up to help with that process. And it's very, very healing for them to be a part of it. It makes them feel very involved and like they're contributing something very meaningful and very loving. And it transforms people more than any other thing I've seen around death, is being a part of the blessing of the body and caring for them in this way. Not everybody wants to be a part of that, but you know, they do have that option. And then you can see how beautiful it can look when somebody's lying at home, decorated with flowers. There's many ways people can express their grief during the time somebody's at home. They can come together. The children will place jewelry on loved ones and flowers on them. We have some pictures of that. You can see flowers decorated on here. People ask me is it okay if children are involved? And I say, well, the children that I've seen be part of this are sometimes they actually will take the hand of an adult and lead them into the room and say, here, you can sit down and talk to grandpa or talk to grandma. And they're very natural around death, providing the adults they're around are also natural around death. But they seem to really take it in and grasp what's going on. And especially when they see it, and they're not going to grow up with all the fear that so many of us have when it's an unknown. They don't know what happened to grandma or grandpa. They just disappeared. That's really hard. So you can see in the upper left corner, this is grandma died. Her brother's sitting there reading the paper, so nobody looks too traumatized, I don't think. The kids are fine around grandma, and they're curious. They ask a lot of questions. They want to know what's happening. And in the bottom left, they're decorating a casket. An 11-year-old, his mother, who was 38, died from melanoma, and he and his friends are decorating the casket. And later you'll see a picture of them at the graveside. And this is a picture of somebody Sally and I were both involved in. Sally, do you want to talk about Brittany a little?
Sure. Jerrigrace was in Hawaii teaching at the death doula training on Maui before COVID. And one of our former students, I won't go into the story before her death, but she was very vital the day that she chose to end her life. She was wallpapering one of her kids' bedrooms. She was talking with her mother-in-law. She was in treatment for depression. She, we don't know when, went out into the barn on their property and hanged herself. And she left a note and a candle. I got a call from two of our court counsel. We have a court counsel at Final Passages who who called me and said that this young woman had chosen to end her life. And they had been called by the family because one of the women had a son who also died tragically he was murdered, and was the first boyfriend of this young woman. And so we got the case and went through many discussions, and I won't go into the details, which would be more appropriate for students who are training with us. But in this case, we typically will do the repairs from a suicide, and or all suicides in California are autopsied. So we typically do the repair, but this was such an extensive autopsy that the mortuary did it. And then Jerrigrace got back from Hawaii the day that we got her back from the coroner, and she went to the coroner and picked her up and brought her to their property.
Actually, from the funeral home, because they had.
Oh, right. She would have
they
been
had
at the
repaired
funeral
them.
home.
Yeah.
Right. They had done the repair. You're right. And it was hot, hot, hot. And she is lying in honor in a greenhouse that she and a friend of hers had built. She was a very earth mama, animals, everything about her was very vital, but she clearly was suffering at a very deep level and was in treatment. And so we had a home funeral there. We supported her widower and her 3 young children. She was pregnant with her 4th. And this is another case where you can see how vitally involved the children were. Her 3 daughters, the oldest was, I think, 8, went into her gardens and brought flowers all through the day. And there were probably 200 people at that home funeral. It was all outside. There were musicians, there was a buffet, and then there was a memorial that was guided by Francis, what's his last, Weller,
Mm-hmm.
who's an extremely well-known grief counselor in Sonoma County, where Jerrigrace lives.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, it was extremely sad and extremely beautiful, and gave people a really big experience of how beautiful a funeral can be, with the body there and lying in her own greenhouse, which seems so appropriate. She was a homeschooler and definitely a homesteader. And when she took our courses, she really embraced the whole idea of a home funeral and had written all about it. And that's when her husband found that information, then that's when he knew that she should be brought home. So this is a good friend of mine, Daphne, and her mom, Connie, who had kidney cancer, and I think she passed 6 weeks after she was diagnosed. We brought her home and from the hospital, and or from her friends where she was with Hospice, in fact, and Daphne was able to say goodbye in her own home. And you could see how pleasant her expression is, and that is not uncommon. We see that on so many people's faces. In fact, this next picture is going to show you this woman actually is not alive in this picture. She's just soon after she died and had this lovely, serene, almost Madonna-like smile on her face. And the transformation that families go through in caring for somebody. In this next picture, you'll see somebody putting makeup on her and putting a dressy blouse on her and preparing her for people to come by and visit her. So the body goes through transformation, and the people caring for them go through transformation. They also, of course, love decorating the caskets. That's so meaningful to people and a great form of art therapy. Everybody, all ages, get involved in this. This woman was a quilter, so all her quilter friends took a different square and turned that cardboard box into a quilt. Children love to be involved in painting the boxes. Absolutely. Everybody loves getting their hands involved in the box decoration, and this family took it to heart or took it to hand.
And I'm remembering Jerrigrace with Stan. His widow used the paint to put footprints. She got into the casket, and she just was gleeful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as much as people are in grief, there is a lot of creativity and even joy, and people feel awkward because they say, I hate to say this, but I actually enjoyed or had fun decorating the casket. But it's just part of life. It's part of remembering the person and personalizing their casket according to who they were in life. So this woman decoupaged this one for her mother. And this young daughter painted the inside of the lid with clouds so that her mother would be looking up at clouds when she was lying inside the box. And this is the lid of the box. So she did a beautiful job on that one. They don't all look like that. They can look every different way you can imagine. This one has just lots of flowers on it, and sometimes they're very simple too, but people use all kinds of vehicles to drive them to the crematorium or cemetery. And this man and his wife posed for the American Gothic with his favorite truck. Years later, his wife got cancer, and he built the box and decorated it with help of friends, and then drove her to the crematorium on that favorite truck. And then here's people at the crematorium saying their final goodbye to that young man you saw earlier that they decorated with flowers. And this is his son and his wife. And then people came outside. Somebody grabbed a guitar while the cremation was going on, and people started dancing, and they were singing, he's free at last, and different things like that. This is at the graveside. Father, this was the 38-year-old, and he started the filling in of the grave by dropping a handful into the grave of dirt. And this is the son of the 38-year-old and his friends. As I mentioned, they help fill in the grave. Very cathartic for them, very healing for them, very therapeutic for young men to physically do something to work with their grief. Music happens at the graveside. Now we're getting into the green burial end of things, and I think we need to go quickly through this part so that, well, we still have a little time. Yeah, we're okay right now, but we'll move through this, letting you know that there's a lot of cemeteries in this country, and these are just probably the ones that are registered as regular cemeteries, not necessarily the small rural cemeteries or religious cemeteries. Or even old homesteader cemeteries that people still have pioneer cemeteries.
Pioneer.
And yeah. And so this is just the major big ones. And I'm going to put up a whole bunch of figures on the screen. And this is not to say these are exact amounts. This is just to say that there is a great deal of resources being put into the earth. And they're not necessarily renewable. And it's very, in most cases, unnecessary. I know the vaults are used to keep, there's some ground that moves a lot. I mean, the earth does move. And when burial sites are very close to each other, there's a concern that one casket might float slightly into another plot. But I mean, the whole idea of being buried in the ground generally is for us to return to the earth dust to dust, as they say. However, these steel caskets in these cement vaults do everything but allow us to return to the earth. They just, I don't see them being helpful in that way. And they say there's enough steel in the caskets buried every year to rebuild the Golden Gate Bridge every year. So that's a lot of steel and enough concrete to build a 2-lane highway from San Francisco to Tucson, Arizona, which is a lot of concrete. So we're doing our best to try to move our culture back toward thinking in terms of our earth being a living being, and that we need to treat her with great care and love, and think about what we're doing when we put all these things into the ground. There's also these things put in the ground or used on the grounds. There's plastic grave liners as well as cement. There's hardwood caskets, including rainforest woods, and that's just, it's just sad because it takes so long for trees to grow back, and there's ongoing, water is becoming more and more of an issue now, and so we don't want all these herbicides and pesticides for the lawn cemeteries. It's time to rethink all of this, and having green cemeteries now growing up is a good sign of that, moving in a new direction. This is an example of green burial. Sally, you can talk about this if you'd like.
Sure. This is Nancy. Yeah. This was a beloved member of the community where Jerrigrace lives, and she lived in an intentional community, and they did a spontaneous shrouding of her before bringing her to the cemetery. And a green burial has none of the plastic, none of the fiberglass, none of the cement. Typically, it doesn't have a container, although there are some beautiful containers, and we can get you in touch with people who make them with willow and seagrass, and they're just gorgeous. So they are biodegradable, so there's no metal or hardwood going in. A green burial is much shallower. It's at about 2 feet, because that's where all the microorganisms live. If you put a body in at 6 feet, they're not going to have as many of the breakdown or decomposing organisms. And it's typically in a natural setting in an effort to make a conservation site. Although in this case, the burial was a section of a conventional cemetery. And one of the cemeteries that Final Passages works with a lot, and I will say that Jerrigrace was essential in getting that cemetery to open to a shroud-only burial. They're very frightened for liability reasons that someone will get hurt. There also, the graves are marked with plants or stones, or I've seen cairns, seashells. In Mendocino, I saw one that had an outline with succulent plants that outlined the plot.
I think that this is Nancy Goddard, who was a good friend in the community, and her partner actually put herbs and her worm bed down in there with her. She was really involved in gardening in a big way in our community. So it was really appropriate too. And he was able to just lean down and actually place him down in the grave because it was shallow enough, which was really nice. In fact, here's some other pictures from that. She had a pine box, but the pine box was made so that the lid and the sidewalls could be removed and just placed down on the pine plank. And then even the ropes were pulled out because they were made out of nylon. So we wanted to, since they weren't considered biodegradable, we pulled those out as well. They were just put through holes in the plank. A lot of people think cremation is a lot more green than burial, and it is more green probably than conventional burial, but not green burial. It still uses a huge amount of fuel and puts out a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. It also spews mercury and other toxic elements into the atmosphere unless there's scrubbers that the newer crematory, often called retorts, which is a brand name, but the newer ones have scrubbers that collect the mercury and other things from going out into the atmosphere. So if they have a new one, that's very helpful, but the older ones don't have that. Now, I would say the majority of them in this country do not have them, but you certainly could ask. So they do put out a lot of CO2. Well, one of the things that can help offset some of that carbon footprint in our communities and in our country is the reef balls that were created, and they are made out of cement. They're mixed with the ashes of your loved ones, and then they are sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Because of the dragnet type fishing, a lot of the coral has been removed from the bottom of the ocean, and of course that's the habitat for fish. So now they found a way to replenish that coral by sending reef balls down to the ocean bottom, and it's really helping. And they do that off the coast of Florida, but I think they're doing it in other places now too.
Before we go on, I just was reading a study, Jerrigrace. I don't think I even told you. The UK, because it's such a densely populated area, one study was the incidence of acid rain downwind from crematories. And that's because of the sulfur that's released during a cremation if they don't have those scrubbers that Jerrigrace was referring to.
Yeah, and because of the UK being a much smaller area, they don't have the burial space. So it's even more imperative that they get some various or different types of disposition involved there, so they're not putting out so much into the atmosphere. That's very interesting. Yeah, I'd like to see that article on acid rain. Jeez. What next? This form of disposition is and it's actually been improved in about 18 states. But it's a matter of somebody putting out the initial expense of the machine. It's also referred to as water cremation. Because it uses water rather than flame cremation, so they're calling it flame or water, and the water is heated. There's steam involved. There's lye involved and pressure, and it reduces the body to bone in about the same time as fire or flame cremation. Takes about an hour and a half, and the bones come out looking more white than the flame cremation, but otherwise, and the families can get some of the bones back, but they can also bury them. They can have them buried somewhere, or the place that has the machine can take care of them. If the family doesn't want the bones back. And the water that it's reduced to, it's a light brown color water, and they say it's sterile enough to be able to use on a field, like you could, water plants and such with it. I'm not sure how it's all processed yet, but there are films. If you go online and want to watch more about the whole process, we've found several films on it, and we don't have time to show you all that this morning. We do show our students in class, but it does show you the inside. Just looks like a stainless steel chamber where a body is slid in on a tray, and So I believe that there's a couple in Sacramento and one in San Jose area of the Bay Area that will be coming along in the next year or so. I think we'll start seeing this more and more. I definitely know it's in Canada, and other states have adopted the use of it.
One of our participants mentioned that she works with White Rose Aqua Cremation, and I asked her to share in the Q&A if she has anything to add.
Okay.
And I also wanted to mention that there's one in the Watsonville, which is near Monterey, the central coast of California, that one of my families used for their animal. This work started with large farm animals and research animals at universities. That's when Aquamation started.
And then they started using them for people who donated their body to science. And when they were complete with their exploration of the body and doing whatever they were going to do with the body, they've been using these machines for them. So it is a growing thing and coming down, yeah, because of all the problems with the fuel and so forth. And so let's see, we're going to move on to, so Recompose is actually the name of a business, and this is what it looks like in Seattle. But it actually is about natural organic reduction. And that means that we're turning the body into compost. So it's becoming soil. Once again, that can be used again on fields and such. And we've just recently, Final Passages had an educational monthly series on natural organic reduction. And we had a woman whose husband was the 8th person who was composted at this facility. And she came on with us a story about his life, and he was a major consultant for gardening and all kinds of soil.
Permaculture.
Permaculture, thank you. And so it was very appropriate for him to be the one to be, you know, the person that she was telling this story about. So it was very moving, very, very moving. And then she was actually sitting on the heap of soil after because it's quite a bit of soil actually that you end up with, and the families can come and get the soil, use it on their own land, or they will take it to a forested place in Seattle area. Yeah, I think that we are going to probably have that archived on our website soon. So if people want to go and watch it, they may be able to do that.
There's also the third try in the state of California to get natural organic reduction legalized in the state of California. And the bill is before the governor right now. And if you want to know about sending a letter of support, he's denied it twice. And we're going to try it a third time. So get in touch with us and we'll tell you how you can put your enthusiasm and energy behind that.
Yeah, there's even a form letter, right, Sally?
Right.
Yeah, that if people don't feel they're creative writers, there is already a form letter written as to why we want to support people being able to compost bodies. And by the way, it only takes 4 to 6 weeks. So think of that compared to a regular cemetery burial where it's going to take about a year to possibly up to a year to break the body down into the soil. And that's if they're not in a vault and in a cement vault or in a steel casket. So it's very fast, and we go back to the earth and we help the earth. You know, the earth is providing for us, so we think about, well, how can we give back to the earth? And this is one of the ways we can do it. So at the end of this, we want to help prepare everybody for end of life, and we encourage you to complete your advance directives, and to have your community do the same. Just talk to your family and say how important it is. Sally, do you want to say a couple words about why it's so important to have an advance directive?
Well, Prince didn't have an advance directive or a will, and look what happened to him. And it's not uncommon for families, especially around final committal or final release choices, to have family members argue and say, well, mom said she wanted this. Well, no, she told me this. And Prince overdosed, SBC. So if you have this written, first of all, and signed by you, I've encouraged, in one case, I encouraged the person on her advanced healthcare directive to include a video of what she wanted done, because she anticipated her children would not follow through on her wishes for care of her body. And it's not just care of your body. It's how do you want to die? Do you want to be plugged into machines? Maybe. Or do you want a more, as some people call it, allow a natural death? And if so, do you want palliative care, like pain relief? All of that can be included in an advanced care directive, if not in the official form, as an addendum. And in the state of California, so far I don't know another state, if anybody does, please let us know, is the only state that whoever has durable power of attorney for your health care, that DPOA persists after the individual's death. It's the only DPOA that persists after death, not financial, not anything else, just care of the body. And that person has the legal authority for what happens to your body, which I serve the LGBTQ community as a member of that community. And that's really important sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So we offer lots of education around these topics and preparing you, as we've already said. You can go to our website. You can contact me directly through the website. If you have questions, you also can join the National Home Funeral Alliance. They have a website that has a lot of information on it, as well as the Funeral Consumers Alliance. That's the national organization is in Vermont. Josh Slocum is the executive director. He's extremely knowledgeable about all things about death and dying, and particularly around contracts with funeral homes. And if you have questions like that, he's a great one to find out the answers, and also where a local Funeral Consumers Alliance might be near where you live in this country. Of course, you're in there may be other organizations in other countries similar, but this is in this country. Okay. And finally, we, of course, encourage people to take trainings in our workshops, and where we do, if you want the deep dive into really exploring death and dying and preparing yourself as well as a loved one, like getting prepared for that, how to care for them, how to be with them, exploring your fears and concerns, talking about conscious dying and what is conscious dying and what is conscious living. We teach people about the practical process and procedures and paperwork. We teach them about eco-friendly and affordable choices and methods. We offer instruction on planning, carrying out, and guiding family-directed home funerals. And we educate people about all kinds of rituals and ceremonies that support healing. We also have a guidebook that you can order through our website on how to plan, create, and carry out a home funeral. has a section on writing your final wishes, like Carolyn wrote for us, and as well as during the home funeral and how to fill out and file paperwork in the state of California, which applies to a lot of the states, actually, the steps you go through.
And both Jerrigrace and I have consulted to people in other states, and some of our students have as well. They have families in other states, and we know how to get that kind of information. We're not just available as far as California, but to help coach other people in other geographies.
Great, thanks. Let me just.
And there she is. Did you have that up long enough? People can take a photo of it if they want.
I think so.
Oh, no, you took the share screen down. Okay.
I did, but I left it up for a while, so I think, and it'll be on there archived, I guess, in the recording. So
It will be on the
final
recording.
passages.
But-
Yeah.
Jerrigrace, what I was going to ask is if you could send, or Sally, just to send that last page to me, and I'll include that in the email that I send out to people with all those resources.
Okay.
Happy
Okay.
to. And I'll include mine. I think that's just final passages.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll do that. Yeah. So, and I'm also, I forgot to say that I'm also certified now as a Maid doula, which is medical aid in dying doula. And that is if people are considering ending their life with prescribed medicine from doctors because you have a diagnosed illness and people are in great suffering. And now that it is legal in the state of California, as well as 11 states now, that very often it requires a doula to come, or two, usually we work in tandem, to come to the home and help prepare the medicine and support the person through that process. So that's another additional thing that I've added recently to my spreading my
Credentials and training.
Thank you.
I wanted to say, since you brought up MAID, medical aid in dying is how we speak about it in California, at least. I got this from Nancy Finkel, that there is a conversation afoot to make medical aid in dying available in cases of dementia, regardless of, and if it's even an unknown cause. Currently in California, a medical aid in dying cannot be, thanks Jerrigrace for putting that in there, cannot be used in cases of dementia. They have to have a terminal diagnosis. And if a person has been declared incompetent, horrible choice of words, but that's the language, that they cannot sign for their own choice. It's a real catch-22.
Wow, yeah. So
We've had Dan Diaz, so some of you may know his wife, Brittany Maynard, was the young woman who died of a glioblastoma by having to move to Oregon, and really got people is kind of educated about what people had to go through. And so there is a talk up on the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross YouTube page from Dan about medical aid in dying, if people would like more information about that specifically. So yeah.
Great.
Thanks, Susan.
Questions? Do we have a number of things that people have put up in the chat? I'm curious if this is a good time to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
So hi, Kelly. I see Kelly is here with us. Kelly is a funeral director herself, and she's put up the question earlier, and you may have addressed this, but could you go over the process for registering the death certificate for the family? I'm a funeral director whose background is in death certificate registration. I've never done a full drop to paper. I don't know if that's.
Do you have about 15 hours?
Perhaps you and Kelly could speak. Yeah, Kelly also was one of the founders of Tulip Cremation, which is, yeah.
So we have written a whole section in our guidebook on how to fill out and file the death certificate. There's a lot of steps involved, and certainly people can take it on. And I have helped many, many families, guide them through to circumvent a lot of problems they might run into so they can expedite that. But there is some challenge. You can only go so fast because Office Vital Records, and this is true for funeral homes as well, they're closed on the weekends. So you can't be doing any filing on the weekends. So if your person dies on Friday and you're going to take on filing the death certificate, you're probably not going to complete that process till Tuesday. So just so you know that it's because they're Saturday and Sunday, you just can't do anything. You have to get the information from the doctor as well as fill out the information about the person who died. That all has to be put into the certificate. I'm giving you the very, very abbreviated answer. And then once you've filled the form out, it has to go through the Office of Vital Records, be approved as it is, with all the correct information and spelled correctly and everything, because it is a legal document, so you can't make mistakes and so forth. You can't write out or erase. You have to start over if you made a mistake. And then you get the doctor's, once it's approved, you get the doctor's signature on it, and then you make your appointment with the Office of Vital Records to file. So, and there's a disposition permit that has to also be filled out. It's not a legal document, but it still also has to be filled out. So that's the short answer to a much longer one of how to do it step by step. And again, that's in our guidebook. So if you really want to know in detail how to do it, it has all the abbreviated rules of how to fill out each box on the death certificate and the disposition permit.
I'm going to put the name of the book, Final Rights, in the chat. I don't think we had a slide on that. Which
and if you
goes,
could include that, Sally or Jerrigrace, when you send me the information that you'd like people to have, then we can just also include that on.
that makes sense. I like that better. Thanks, Susan.
And everything will be in one place.
A picture of that, Sally, or just the name of it?
I'll put the deets about the publication date and all that.
Okay. But Susan, do you want a picture of the book or just the details about the book?
No, I'm just saying that we can talk about that at the end. I'll send an email. I just want a list of all the resources that you've given.
Okay.
So that I can put it into an email and send it to people so they have everything in one place to look for.
Excellent. Very good.
Susan, do you have it enabled that we can save the chat too?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's enabled. Yeah.
Okay, I'll save the chat.
All right.
Anne is asking a question here, and I think the power of attorney for healthcare persists after death, but I think at death, your power of attorney, if you are the medical power of attorney, at the death, that ends. So anything that happens after the moment that they die.
So
unless
Sally will address that.
Except, Susan, in California.
Yes.
California, whoever you assign as your durable power of attorney for healthcare, it specifically says that you're assigning the care of the body after death
Yes.
to the person who has the durable power of attorney for healthcare. It's the only DPOA that I know of
Yes.
that persists after death. And especially in disenfranchised communities, it's really important to know that you've assigned that to somebody that you trust who's going to do what you want.
Mhm. Yes. There's another question here about where did you get your Maid doula certification from? The same person. Anne is asking that again.
There's an organization called Maid. It's the Academy for, and I'm sorry, certification. And it's MAID again is medical aid in dying. So it's ACAMAID. And they have some videos that you watch and you take some tests, and that they will send you a certificate after you've taken the tests. There's also, they offer a mentoring program as well. So if you want to call and talk to them about being on a referral list, they will want to talk to you about your experience with death and so forth, that you're not new to this, and why you want to become a Maid doula and so forth, and then they might take you on as a doula practitioner, and if they feel that you've had enough experience, they'll do referrals in your area. to have you be a Maid doula. So.
And Santu is asking, and I would imagine this varies from state to state, possibly Santu is actually in the UK. Can you have a death care arrangement status which is different from the power of attorney? Could you ask somebody else to do that for you? Yes.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, you want to go through an attorney though. You
My-
can usually go to the legal aid if you don't want to get involved in an estate attorney or there are also attorneys who specialize in elder care law. And you're just going to ask for the durable power of attorney or authority over the body. And there may be states where you can't do that, or countries. It's not something I've looked at, across the geographies, but definitely, and a lot of cases, it's included in the will, which is what my brother in Florida did. And nobody could find the will. And I was his only surviving relative. And his niece by marriage wanted to make all the decisions. So.
Wow.
Somebody's asking here, there's no state, I believe this is accurate, there's no state that allows medical aid in dying for people with dementia currently. Is that correct? Right. Somebody would like to be able to follow the information about this development and wanted to know who Nancy Finkel was. I don't know if either of you have a resource you could put up in the chat there. And I am going to continue to go through. If you live in one state but die in another, do the laws of the dying state apply, including paperwork, death certificate paperwork, etc.? So as a California resident, if I was on vacation, say in New Orleans, and I died there, which state prevails in terms of what I get to do with my body and how it gets done?
I'd say the state that you died in.
Yeah.
For the body.
For the body. For the
Your
body.
care, your advanced healthcare directive, usually they'll defer to your state of residence. And when I teach this stuff, I always tell people to put it in the suitcase you always travel with. Just put a copy in there. And put one in your glove box of your car.
And going back, thank you for that. Going back to the medical aid in dying for dementia, I did just work with a friend of mine actually, who had an elder woman who was diagnosed with dementia. And while we can't do it in this country, I think she went to Norway.
Sweden. Switzerland.
Okay. And she was able to carry out the medical aid in dying there. So she made arrangements. As long as she could get the diagnosis here and transfer the paperwork, the doctors were willing to fill out the form of her diagnosis. She was able to go there, and she did. I heard just last week that she carried out her wishes there. So,
and as far as Nancy Finkel, I would need to check with her.
Yeah.
You can also, anybody who wants to be on my mailing list, will include that, and Jerrigrace's mailing list when we send our information afterwards.
Yeah, we have a newsletter right on our homepage of Final Passages. So you can sign up for our newsletter, and that gives you not only when our classes are happening, but our educational events and other community death and dying rituals, and groups and many other things we hear about. I mean, we don't do everybody's resource, but there's also Suzette Sherman. We might include her too.
Yes, Seven Ponds.
Seven Ponds is a really good resource for a lot of different things.
The word 7ponds.com.
So we can put that up as well. Julie says here in Canada that they have changed. There's a bill that's recently been changed so that people who have dementia but still have capacity, they may have diagnosis but deemed capable of making decisions to have medical in dying, they can have it at an agreed upon date. So sounds like Canada is moving forward with this. And I am going to go kind of quickly now because we have something like 30 messages here. So let's see if we can get to a couple more of these.
Also, there are ways around the not being able to have the advanced healthcare directive for dementia in California. That's a whole workshop, but
Yeah.
I can give you a thumbnail sketch if you get in touch with me, and I can make a referral to someone too.
Thank you, Rose. Rose from Rwanda. So Ken Ross was just in Rwanda at a medical conference the other day. Welcome. Culturally
Welcome.
and dying, yes. As most of us in the United States are, these are exceptions. There's sadly not people walking around in groups of friends talking about death and dying very often. So this, I would say, is an exception, but it is a movement across the country that to provide information for people to understand death and dying, not as a mistake that happens to other people because something terrible went wrong or they expired, but as part of our natural life. And this is one of the things Elisabeth Kübler-Ross really believed, is that death was another natural transition in our lives. So I think that right now, let's see, 2 more messages. And Raina Halpern, who also manages our death cafes for the foundation, is also ACA doula for Maid. So she's put information up there. But we are 4 minutes from the end. 7ponds.com is a death and dying resource with lots of information about different areas, Santu. So I think that unless anybody has a question where they'd like to raise their hand and ask it, you can do that by going to the bottom of the page and clicking on either those 3 dots and then on reactions, or on a reactions key at the bottom of your screen. If anybody has a question that they would like to ask out loud, please put your hand up. And if not, I think that we will wrap it up. ADEC also is a good resource. Yes, that is also very true.
Yeah, I presented, oh my gosh, like 7 years ago there with Suzette Sherman from 7 Ponds. They tend to be very theoretical and academic, but they've really started to bring in the human element. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Many people have. I also was at the I was involved in presenting for the City of Hope conference last year. And again, they were bringing in green burial and home funerals and all kinds of things. So many people are opening up to this now. And that's wonderful to see. It just warms my heart because we've been a long, cold road at times, trying to open people up to the idea of just talking about death.
Well, you all will appreciate that when Elisabeth Kübler-Ross presented for a nonprofit that I was part of in Boston, we had to partner her up with Frederick Leboyer, who is the founder, for whatever a better word, I'm sure, of conscious birthing and birthing in water. And we called it conscious birthing, conscious dying. So we had to bookend it. People were not talking about this in 1982.
Somebody also just posted, can you do a green burial home funeral in a nursing facility, like a nursing care or a boarding care? And I would say that probably really depends on the boarding care, and that's something you would want to talk with them up front before your loved one, or you are there and they say no. So you might want to have that in writing up front.
I've actually done that. And whenever it was for a friend's parents, and I met with the executive director and in the room with the 2 parents and their surviving children, and I guided the conversation, they were thrilled. But most places don't want dead bodies around. And it is legally your home if that's where you live. So there are other alternatives, and there are going to be places who say no way at all. But it is increasingly possible, even if you only do a vigil for 6 hours. That's better than most policies.
And a lot of hospitals welcome families to come in, if they don't need an immediate bed, or they can move them to a room that isn't needed at that time. They welcome families in to wash the body, at least, for some hours, like Sally mentioned, like 6 hours or whatever they need before the funeral home comes and takes them away. But we've also helped many, many families bring their loved ones home from the hospital so that so that they could have their home funeral. And because fortunately have a good relationship with a local funeral home, we also can ask them to pick up someone from a convalescent home. Usually they only have 2 to 4 hour window, and then bring them to their home, which we did just a couple weeks ago.
I would also, this is a good time to mention that what somebody's policy is, and this goes for mortuaries as well, not just assisted living and SNFs and so forth. A policy is not a law. And one of the things I tell my people who are doing advanced care planning is that if you're going into a residence other than your own, and you know you want this kind of care, or your family wants to give you this care, include that in your conversations before you sign the contract.
Well, I want to just thank both of you so much for so much information, so much wisdom, and for the years of experience. I have to chuckle when we were just talking about the movement forward. I remember 30 years ago, just feeling like I was just talking to myself all the time about this. And so now 30 years later, there's lots of people interested in these topics. So it's great to see this. I am going to put a link up on next week. I can't believe it's next week, the 15th, possibly.
Yeah.
Next Thursday evening, Barbara Carnes, who is one of our favorite folks to present. For anybody that's worked in hospice anywhere, that's seen the Little Blue Book or gone from my site, she's the author of that and about 3 dozen others. And she'll be joining us. She's got a new book about caregiving, which will be on Thursday evening from 6 to 7:30 Pacific time. And the link just went up so people can register for that. And we have a Death Cafe now twice a month, thanks to Rye, and we hope to see some of you there. I just want to thank you both, Jerrigrace and Sally, so much for so much support that you've been giving to families for so many years, and just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work. And so many people are touched by it. I'm really grateful. On behalf of the foundation, I just want to thank you. I'm going to turn this off. I'd ask people just to remain silent for a moment. You'll hear a message that the recording is off. And I look forward to seeing you all at some other events. So we're going to end the recording now.